One of the most important things I think that most entrepreneurs don't do is sit back and evaluate a few things before they launch their concept.
It's so important to be able to match who you want to work with, because you can really truly develop a transformation through their perspective and why, and it's just a good match. So I love working with people that have grit. They want to transform and that they do have a clear why.
Welcome to the Entrepreneurial Show, where we have great conversations about entrepreneurship, business ownership, personal development, and leadership. I'm David Ritchie.
And I am Madeline Ritchie.
Madeline, last show we started discussing, and we started a series discussing the things that we did as we evaluated our own growth and trajectory from coming from corporate into entrepreneurship and business ownership. And in the last episode, we discussed a number of things about how we thought, some things that were obstacles for us, things we did well, things that we need to work on. And then we kind of set the stage to have a conversation about this over a few episodes of that whole transition from corporate to business ownership and entrepreneurship. Today, I wanted to talk about things that we evaluate before we actually started building the business. Now, this is after you have an idea, and it's before you start investing any major dollars into what you're thinking about doing. And one of the most important things I think that most entrepreneurs don't do is sit back and evaluate a few things before they launch their concept. And the most important is, why are they doing it? And I know that you have a very specific take on this. For me, from the business perspective, the understanding the why is similar to what you think. However, I leverage it from a standpoint of many things that we look at when we're doing a business launch, right? So it may be different, it may evolve, but for me, I look at the why as the start point, not necessarily kind of an end point yet. And I know that we worked with a client, and it was interesting as they were launching their business. They were a little bit ahead of the process, which was kind of hard to pull back some of the layers on why they made decisions that they did. However, we pulled them back. And I remember vividly that day we were meeting with this client, and they realized their real why, the real why of why they were really wanting to embark on this journey. And it was emotional, but I look at that person today and I see them, and I see their grit. And I see that they're going back to their real why, not the why they thought. And sometimes people think, well, the why is because life happened to me. The why is because they want to make money. But there's always a real why. And that is the one that I love working with, because it helps me understand in many ways why I'm working with them.
Yeah.
So,
That's it's so important to be able to match who you want to work with, right? I mean, because you can really truly develop a transformation through their perspective and why, and it's just a good match. So I get it. I love working with people that have grit, and that they want to transform, and that they do have a clear why as to. And you don't have to have a clear why to work with us, but it kind of helps.
Well, no, you don't. But to your point, understanding their why has a great deal of value when it comes to alignment. And, it's like, I go back to when we started our first business in BNN. Our initial why was you wanted to replace
My income.
your income. The second why became because you didn't want to be in corporate anymore.
No, did not want her to go back.
And the third why that evolved a little bit at time became because we wanted to be able to give back as success started happening, we found a whole nother layer of why. But the original thing ultimately was, and I remember asking you this, and this is why understanding what your real why is. It wasn't the income. It was making sure that our girls had the lifestyle that they had grown accustomed to. And to be able to do the things that we wanted to do that we always did as a family. Now you have to remember, guys, this is 17 years ago. A lot of life has happened for us since then, right?
Yes.
So the thing that I remember when it really became crystal clear that the why wasn't about the money. The why was about our children. And that's what you woke up every day thinking about.
Yes, that was incredible because it allowed me to be home and available for them while working, to grow a business. And that was still replacing my income. And I didn't have to get up every morning and do the hustle and bustle to get to work and drop them off in a hurry. So that was very, very fulfilling for me. As I think about it, when you're in the moment of something, you don't realize what an amazing opportunity is being presented. But you take a step back, and now I think about, they had me there the whole entire time. Right.
Yeah.
And you were able to afford that opportunity for us as well, because you were the main breadwinner at the time. Right. And when you stayed in corporate, I dabbled into what today supports both of our incomes and many others.
Yeah. But even back then, you said something interesting. You see, it's the emotional why, guys. It's not the tangible thing that you're thinking of, because we all go into business. We all start a business. We all go to work to make money. That is the known why. The unknown why. And if you remember back in that time, I was traveling. The industry was in a little bit of crisis, as we all know.
Yes.
So there was other things going on, in that you were able to have the freedom to be home, to be more accessible. Not that you weren't working 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
It was not that at all. But because the way we built it,
right,
we were able to afford ourselves some immediate luxuries, even though we weren't where we wanted to be yet. And we were about 50% of the way.
Right.
So to me, that's why uncovering the emotional why is so important. Are there things that you do when you're working with a client that help them uncover that emotional why?
Absolutely. And some of the things, interestingly enough, at the time when I became an entrepreneur, I didn't look at it this way. But as I develop and grow in my journey, right, one of the things that I've learned from a mindset, and one of the frameworks that I use for my clients, is exploring their value system. And I know I've talked about this before, but today we are going to deliver a very small framework that will help you make those decisions in the wheel of life, if you will. Because the wheel of life is the most critical piece to be able to understand where you're headed.
Yes.
So exploring my values today, and how I work with my clients to explore those values before we even do anything, right? Because values, again, as we have said in the past, they are your compass. Your compass to do anything that you want to do and how you want to do it. So what I do, the process is very simple. 4 different questions. In fact, I wrote them down here. So the very first question that one has to ask, and this is doesn't matter if it's money, career, friendships, romance, whatever it is. These are the 4 questions that I will invite you to ask every time. And one is, why is the value important to you? And list everything as to why is it that important. So it's going back to that why that we were talking about. Then the second question, once you list all of things, but before you do that, let's just take, for instance, career. What is important in your career, right? Is it freedom? Is it integrity? Is it growth? Is it money? Right? And then, so you list 8 and you do it in the manner in which you want to prioritize those 8. And once you prioritize them, then you go one by one and you ask these questions. Why is that value, whether it's money, right? Let's take money, for example, is important to you. And then you list everything else that all the reasons why that is, right? Then you go, what does this value mean to you? Important to understand, there are two different, one is the why, one is the what. Okay. So once you list the reasons why this value is meaningful to you, then you want to go into how do you know when you have achieved this value? Okay.
Right.
And this is very important because this is going to take you to the next question. Is this value currently being met?
Yeah.
Okay. And within that question, there is a why. Why and why not has not been met. What hasn't been met? 9 times out of 10, I'm going to tell you that it has not been met. So it will be why not, right? And then you're gonna stop and think, okay, well, I really haven't done anything to put myself in the environment to make that happen for myself. And that's the discovery and the aha moment that they get out of this value system and framework. It is, why hasn't been met, why or why not, and what actions can you take to fulfill that, whatever it is, right? So really, that becomes a real shift into the mindset because now it's clear, it's in writing, it's in front of you. It is you putting it on paper. Right? So that's the framework that I use for all of my clients before we go into anything, just to be able to understand why aren't they there? And so they can understand why aren't they there?
What I love about that is it is a framework that you can use not only for business, as you said. It could work on a relationship. It could be on how you're raising your children. It could be how you're doing if you're taking courses in school. It could be about so many different things. And so that's a life framework. And I love that. And I don't know if we actually really have ever sat down and said, these are the questions that we're asking each other, or the ones that you're leading us in conversation a lot of times. But hearing it makes me feel like, wow, we're really attacking the emotional why, figuring out if we're doing the right things.
Right.
And, I say this with, not being bragging and anything else, but, those are key questions that every couple that should be asking themselves. And if you're like us,
even if you're not a couple,
right.
even if you're a single person,
My point there is even as couples that are in business together, right? So there's so many layers to that, and I think it's really important. But that's, guys, why the idea of really getting to the real why, the real emotional why impacts, because business is not simple and it's not easy. There's going to be good times, there's going to be some tough times, and there's going to be some bad times. And what we need to make sure is that we are finding the motivation that is going to keep us moving forward in those tough times. Listen, when your business is doing, $1 billion a year, it's easy to keep it going. It's not easy to keep it going, but it's easy to keep you motivated to keep doing more because you're seeing the value of it. It's the tough days that you need that extra reason. And I love what that you did there, and I like that you said to write it down. One of the things that I write down in my my book is my key motivators, right? And they can be whatever that you want them to be, but I find them to be very emotional motivators. They're usually relational. They're usually something that has to do with our children. They usually have to do something with it's a goal or an aspiration that we're looking for. So I think that's great advice, and I thank you for bringing a framework that is so simple.
Yes, I know. It's so hard to listen. Entrepreneurship, navigating a successful journey is hard enough And when you put frameworks around it, and they're simple frameworks that are very powerful, it helps us. It gives us the clarity that we're looking for, right? And the cool thing is, like you said, this is just a career, for example, that I took, right? You could do this in romance and love. How to identify the person that you want if you are looking to be together with somebody, right? And these are like 4 simple questions. What if it's a romance type of situation? I am not a relationship coach whatsoever. Why am I not finding this person, right?
Right.
What are the actions that I am doing to get to that level and to find the right? Am I dating? Am I on the right sites? Am I being authentic to myself when I put it in my profile? It's not a fake, filtered picture with all the right words, but when I'm attracting the wrong person because that person is shallow, that's what they're looking for.
Right.
It's really interesting. It's building a foundation for your value system.
Yeah. And I think that's an amazing thing. And thank you again. Guys, the next thing after we kind of uncover our emotional why is really to take a step back, in my opinion. And again, this is one that I think we get to the same spot. We look at it a little differently, right? Is a personal skills and experience and how that impacts the business. But I know you look at it on a little different front from your experiences as well. So allow me to just take from a business perspective the reason why I think it's important to understand your personal skills and your experience. I think if you're first starting out, this is something that I see a lot where people jump into something that they have no real knowledge about. And that's going to give you a slower growth curve. But I think even more importantly, if you understand your skills and what experiences you can leverage off when you start, you understand how and why, and when you do your SWOT analysis and you look at your strengths and you look at your weaknesses and your opportunities, then I think you find how you need to build your team. And whether you're outsourcing your team or hiring directly, that is a decision that you can make based on your business. But to me, the practical experience of understanding who you are, what you're really good at, and really getting into a deep SWOT analysis to understand that and highlight it, it gives you a great deal of strength when you're launching. Because the one thing we know when you start a business, and this is something that if you're looking at franchises, and as I said in a couple extra episodes, we're gonna talk a little bit about that too. But you need to understand you need to be involved in the business. And we talked about this last time on the last show about the absentee owner. Well, or semi-absentee. There's really never an absentee or semi-absent owner. You're an owner, and you will have to learn the business, work the business to some extent, and you still have to manage it. So if you don't have those experiences, and I think then you need to understand that you need to find those people that have those experiences. And I think the other thing that it brings me to the business perspective is when we are sitting and we are launching a new business, whether a startup or a franchise, it is not always fun. And you need to leverage the experiences that you have and the skills that you have to help you get through the non-fun stages.
Yes.
Because what's really hard is when it's just you. And I think that leads into some of your thoughts on understanding personal skills and experiences.
Yeah, I love now the SWOT analysis, right? I didn't at the time because I already knew where my zone of genius was and where I wanted to do.
Right.
What I found out, though, that when I transitioned from corporate to entrepreneurship, I was everything. I had to learn everything. And it's not a bad thing because, as I said before to you when we were talking about this earlier, it's one of those things that you want to know everything, even if you're not going to end up doing everything. You have to have the knowledge on every every little detail of your business to be able to see, I hate to say this, if you are being scammed, it's important to know where it is, right? That's when whether your employees are working hard at work or dealing with your clients, how you want them to deal with your clients, right? You need to understand every aspect. So transitioning, for me, I did learn that, and it was helpful up to a point. But when we opened our second one, I learned even more, right? I learned that you have to be a student of life when you are in entrepreneurship, or overall, I would say in everything. But when you are owning a business that you start from scratch, and we started two, we founded 2 businesses, 3 businesses now, but the third one is a little bit kind of a easier way of doing it, because now we understand everything that needs to happen. But even understanding what needs to happen, I don't do graphics. So you know what? I'm going to outsource that. But I understand what resonates with me, right? When I look at a graphic, if somebody presents it to me, right? If I want to do a marketing, well, marketing is not my zone of genius, but I'll tell you what, I am going to know who I'm going to hire. I'm going to ask the right questions. And those things are valuable.
Yes.
And it was valuable for us. Those learning lessons were costly, but they were great lessons. And that's what we are hoping that you're getting from these episodes that we are putting together, that the lessons that we learned, that you don't get to repeat them because they can be extremely costly.
They can. I think the other thing that was interesting about your experience was initially, and actually it was in both businesses that we started, our first 2. And I think that it was interesting because what happens when you start a business, whether it's a franchise, startup, or whatever type of business it is, you end up having this moment that you're stuck. And you're stuck in the business, not working on the business.
Yes.
And I'm not here to tell you as a new entrepreneur, new business owner, that you're not going to get deep into the business, as Madeline was kind of alluding to. It's important because if suddenly you have someone that calls in sick, if your manager isn't there, or let's just say in certain parts of the country you have a snow day and not everybody can, or if you're here in Dallas and you have an ice day, but you still may be open.
Yeah.
So you need to know the business. But what happens when we get stuck in our business and working in the business is we don't give it adequate enough time to work on the business and make it more successful, help it grow, find new avenues, find new revenue streams. Literally taking time and listening to your customers, not from a sales perspective, but as an active listener on how you can better what their experience is. We don't spend enough time. We do better now. And it's very difficult because you want to be in the business because you always believe, as Madeline said on a previous episode, nobody's going to care about your business more than you. And so if nobody's caring about your business more than you, the typical person says, I'll just go do it. Well, that's a whole nother discussion for another day. But what you need to do is make sure you're adequately spending time on your business. And I think where you really like to know your personal skills and experience so that you can be ahead of that and you can start thinking, okay, this is what I need. This is what I need to make me better, right? And do I need to learn these other things? Sure. But it's not in the best interest of the business to be working in it all the time. You should work in your business though, guys, because you learn a lot about your people. You learn a lot about what your customers' needs are, and you learn a lot about the things that aren't working well, and you can see the things that are working well. But really, you need to spend more time on your business than in your business. Initially, you're going to be in.
And another thing that I would definitely invite people to do is lead your people to greatness. Spend time developing those that are going to be close to you, and they are going to be people that want to grow.
Yeah. And that's once you have the business.
Well, yeah, but even if even it doesn't matter if it's a new business, you still have to be able to identify, who's going to be your strong person, and how much time you're going to spend developing that individual as well. It's part of leadership.
It is. However, right now we're evaluating things before we have the business, so we don't.
I see.
You need to also be able to, but it's a great point because you should be thinking that way as well. And that's all about your personal skills and your experience, right? Because you have to transfer what you're really good at to somebody else in order for you to be able to work on your business. So the point is really good. You were just saying that they had staff, and we don't have staff yet.
I mean, yes, but I mean, it is just part of it, right?
Absolutely.
I mean,
absolutely. So that's why the next thing, that's why we wanted to talk to you a little bit about personal skills and experience. The next thing you want to evaluate is your idea a full-fledged business? Is it a passion project, or is it a hobby? And this is important because it's going to come up to the next point when we get into financial resources and risk tolerance a little bit. But it's important to understand what your business is. So I'll use our hook as an example. It was a passion project as much as it was a full-fledged business. When that happens, you have perfect alignment in that. But if you're like, and I jokingly said this earlier to Madeline when we were talking about this section, is I said, it would be like if I was to open up because I like to bake, I'm going to open up a cupcake store. And I have no desire to open a cupcake store. I'm sure it would be really good. But why was I going to do it? Is because I like to bake. Now, do I really want to be running that, or is that really more of a hobby for me? And you can still make money as a hobby. We know someone that sells beef jerky. We know someone that sells bread. But it's more of a hobby business, not a full-fledged business. And that's perfectly fine. And you just need to understand if you really don't want to be baking all day long, for example, then this might be a hobby. Or if you have something that is a passion, but it's not really a full-fledged business, you really have to analyze that, because now you're setting it up to be a full-fledged business, but it's really not. And you have to understand, passion businesses, you need to make sure the audience is really there, and you have to have a vehicle to actually deliver the passion.
There is there is the audience for cupcakes, just so you know.
Yeah, I know.
Now, the problem is that you still have to have the skill set to be able to go and advertise it.
Yes.
And sell, right? I mean, you sell cupcakes. Doesn't matter. You just don't just bake cupcakes. So there's a skill set that you need to have.
Well, correct. But that's why I'm saying, is it more of a, I like to do it, and I think I can really grow a business to do this?
It's a side hustle.
Or is it a hustle, right?
There's nothing wrong with side hustles. Listen, right. I love side hustles. I just do,
And for many of you, the side hustle is going to be your business.
Oh, yeah.
And there's tons of business opportunities out for that. My whole point of this portion, though, was really just to say, understand what you're really starting to think about and embark on, right? So, and this is no disrespect, but if you like to mow 5 lawns a week and that's what you want to do, then that's a side hustle. It
depends.
If you want to open up a landscaping business, that's a different business. Both are good. I'm just saying, know what you're really trying to accomplish. Know what it's going to take, right? Because, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit later as well. But to me, understanding what the business objective is from a standpoint, is this a full-fledged business? Is there a market for it? Can I really do what my goals are for that, right? Does it satisfy my emotional why? And does it also achieve my not quote-unquote emotional whys?
Yeah. That's a good point.
Well, thank you, Madeline.
Oh, you're welcome.
So now that you've kind of figured out the skills that you have and your experience, your emotional why, you're moving down the path of what the business really is, the next thing that most people need to start really thinking about is their financial resources and their risk tolerance. So risk tolerance is an area that I'm going to pass over to Madeline because I think she can bring a lot of light to this. So I just want to talk about the financial resources. this is the part that most people, if I think about the four things that reasons why people don't actually act on their idea of going into business. The first two are you and people you know. You, because you self-doubt yourself, and people you know because they say, why would you ever do that? And then you buy into both of those or one of those. But the other two are really kind of important. One, you're afraid or you're hesitant to put money at risk. And that's where the financial resources coming in and understanding how to play that game. And then also, then it falls into you don't want to take a risk. So those last two, right? Financial resources and risk. And they kind of go together just as they are the first two. But those are usually the reasons why people don't go into business. Is they're afraid to lose money, risk. They don't have the money or they don't know how to get the money.
The resources, yeah.
Right? And or somebody says they can't or you don't believe you can. And so to me, understanding this and looking at yourself and having a real conversation before you spend $1 is critical. So financial resources. I mean, there's a couple of ways you can fund your business, right? You can self-fund. We did that on a couple of our businesses. You can take out different types of loans. There's traditional loans, there's line of credits, and there's SBA loans. All are good. They're just different. They take different underwriting. They take different things, right? Depends on dollar amount, depends on your assets. There's a lot of things that go into play when you're looking at financing the business that way. You can look at investors. One of the great things you can do is you can talk to people you know and say, I have an idea. This is what it's going to take. Would you be interested in partnering or would you be interested in being an investor? I mean, you can have the conversation at more length than that.
I have a question on that.
Sure.
So do you recommend that when they have an idea to put a small pitch deck?
Absolutely. Well, yes, no matter what, they should have it. Because first, if you have to go the financing route, you're going to need something that tells the story of what you're trying to build. Also a business plan, but we're not going to get into business planning right now. But you should have a small deck, and you should. And before you do that, you should actually have a pretty good idea of what you're going to do. But you may not have the financing component of your business plan done, and you may not have some other versions of it done. But you should have what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, what's
why it's viable,
and why it's valuable. Yeah. Absolutely. But your deck. I remember we worked with somebody, and the first thing, not the first thing after we created the brand, we ended up creating their pitch deck. And it didn't have to be this amazing document. It just simply had to explain what they were trying to accomplish, who they were, and what they needed, and how they were going to projectively use that money.
Right.
So I absolutely think, and if nothing else, it's good for you as an individual, because now you have something on paper that says, this is what I'm doing. Right. And it's harder to steer away from things. So that's a great question, and I probably should have brought it up. But going back to the financing options, right? So then you can, look at investors. You can obviously bring in partners as well. And then if you're coming from corporate, you should look at ROBS and ROBBS. And what it is it leverages your 401k. And we have done one. It worked out well for us. I'm not going to tell you it's the solution for everybody.
Right.
I am going to tell you that you should evaluate it and you should investigate it. Because what a ROBS does is it takes your 401k, you basically create a C Corp, and it becomes part of a pension plan, or it becomes a pension plan. In our case, because we already had a pension plan with our business, it became part of that one, or it tied to that one. But it's a great way of funding. You don't lose asset value because you're buying stock. Even though you're taking dollars and you're investing in the business, what you've done is you've created an asset on your personal financial balance sheet. So there's a lot of things. I'm not a CPA. I will tell you this, and I'm not an attorney, and I don't pretend to be one, but the most important thing to look at when you're working with anybody on a ROBS is, do they have the compliance structure in order to make sure you're protected, because you are now dealing with stocks and you're dealing with a pension plan. It's not complicated. It's an annual form. And if you work with the right company, they actually are set up to do this. You pay a small monthly fee. And when I mean small, it's less than $150. But then they manage and maintain this pension plan in this corporation for you. You still have to, like you're in Texas, still file your franchise tax and stuff like that. But also income that goes into that is just like your 401k, doesn't get taxed right away.
Nice.
So you can use it as a combination of funding of a business. So you can have part of your business funded by that, and then you can personally fund, or you can get a loan. There's a lot of different things and flexibility.
So what I heard you say was that it doesn't have to deplete your assets. It actually adds to the assets because it's converted into stocks.
Well, no, it maintains your assets.
It maintains your assets.
Maintains your assets.
So it doesn't deduct from your
right,
assets
so-
when you spend the money in the business
Right,
that you're
because
opening.
just say, for example, you were going to go and you were going to buy a home.
Yeah.
And they ask you, what's your what assets do you have? Then you can say, even though you don't see the liquid
Right.
cash in like your 401k, which you don't see the cash anyway, you're probably in stocks and things like that. Anyway, so just think of it the same way. All you're doing is transferring ownership into a different type of stock.
Got it.
So again, not a CPA, not an attorney, not a financial advisor, simply saying it's something that you should
Well,
look
it's something
at.
that we've done, and
Yeah.
it worked out for us extremely well.
Extremely well. And I will tell you that when you do it, if you're working with negotiating a lease, it's very quick. So that, unlike an SBA loan where you are waiting and they want to wait for the executed lease before they will start processing the loan. In most financing options, that's true.
Yeah.
This, you can basically be funded in about a week.
Oh, nice.
So it can move the process down really quick. Again, just want to restate, not a CPA, not an attorney, not a financial advisor, just a personal user at one time, and it worked out very well for us. Now, risk tolerance. This is an interesting conversation for me, guys, because coming out of corporate, and by probably no misunderstanding by anybody that knows me, is I was not the most tolerant of risk. I was risk adverse. And then I have Madeline over here that is a little bit less concerned about overall risks, believing that good things will happen. But what ended up happening is her mindset and my mindset kind of merged. Tell me about your thoughts on risk and how you would work with someone on becoming more comfortable with not jumping into from the Eiffel Tower all the way down, but without a net or without a parachute. But how would you work with someone to get them to be more comfortable taking risks?
So I am a firm believer that you got to risk it to get the biscuit. That's just always been my thing, right? I am willing to bet on myself. And if you're willing to bet on yourself, by all means, take the chance, because why not? What's the worst that can happen, in my opinion? I always think, what's the worst that can happen? And the worst that can happen is you can fail. Okay, so if you have the skill sets and you have health, you have wealth, because it allows you the opportunity to do a do-over every single time, in my opinion, right? We've proven it, we found it, the hook, for example, while that was not the best investment, it taught us a wealth of things, right? A and B, it accomplished what I wanted to accomplish, which was the transformation of the women that I wanted to help, right? And so, but that's me, right? I mean, that is how I assess that. Now, what I teach my clients when they come in with a fixed mindset and I shift them to a growth mindset, which I have done that with you as well. You've done a great job. I go through the value system process, right, for my clients, and understanding what is important to them, and let them come out with a solution of what they believe is important and owning it, right? And so, and understanding that in life, you got to take chances, when you work for somebody else, which I told you this, you got to work hard. And it takes one mistake for that CEO or that person that it holds your paycheck, right, to make a mistake and you're out of a job. So you're taking chances anyways in life. When you go to work, You don't know if you're going to have a job, right? Not that I'm trying to be Debbie Downer here, but that's a fact, especially nowadays, right? When you get in the car and drive to work, you have a 50-50 chance. There's a lot of people out there that not always paying attention. So my point is that we're taking risk every single day. And so that's the way I look at things. Well, I'm taking that chance. So why wouldn't I bet on myself? And knowing that I am good enough to make that happen, and I am going to make it work because I have the skills, I have the confidence level, and I have the support that you give me to be able to make that happen.
Yeah, and I think what helped me, and you said it earlier on, and I thought it was so good, I want to remind people of it, is that ask yourself, what is the absolute worst thing that can happen? And what Madeline really got me to believe, and anybody that knows me knows I'm not sitting around, reading off or reciting affirmations every day, and not that
they work.
Not if you do that it's bad, or that you don't, it's not good. I probably should do it more, but I do have one I have a couple, but I mean, it's not like I have this plethora of them that I have to go through. I do believe this, though, is that there is an abundant amount of money in the world, in the universe, and it's there, and you have to put your mind right in a direction, and you have to say that you're worthy to capture it. And you may not capture it with the idea that you may have been struggling with, or maybe it's actually been a failure. But I assure you, if you stay confident in belief that there is enough money out there to satisfy your goals, and you say that to yourself, and you say what you're going to do with it, and you believe in that, I do believe that, and it has made me less risk adverse. We will talk about this later, I still look at the numbers.
Of course.
I still want to make sure that it's all good. But what I do now do a much better job of is accepting risk as a real part of the business process. Yeah. And what I tried to do was avoid it at all costs. And that mitigated business growth and personal growth.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the same thing, not that we're relationship people, but that's the same thing with relationships.
Yes.
You gotta put yourself out there and risk yourself to being hurt.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
So it's no different. It's just a different way of looking at it, because we look at that as that's emotional. That didn't cost me money. Well, I'm going to tell you, and you talk about this with clients all the time. Not that I'm listening, but I've heard, when you kind of talk to me about, thoughts that I have, when we're working together with each other, is that, if you are emotionally not where you need to be, you're financially losing.
Oh, for sure. Yes. That is so, again, it's so critical to ask those 4 questions that I gave the framework before.
And what were they again?
So the framework is, why is the value important to you? List all of those. What does the value mean to you? Right? Are you there yet? Right? And what actions can you take to put yourself ahead of the game, right?
Yep. I just think they're just amazing, and I really do. And I like hearing them, because I say them to myself, right?
Yeah.
And everything you do, and every task you got. What am I trying to accomplish?
Yeah.
Am I there yet? If not, why not?
Yeah.
Just move on, right? And then you put yourself in a place.
And understand why not, and owning it, right?
Yeah,
Owning it, because it's important to own what we have not done. It's like, I had a session with somebody, and one of the things that they wanted was freedom. And we went through the process, and by the time the conversation was over, the individual was like, wow, I really never thought of it in that manner. And you're right, I have not done anything to put myself into the situation to be and have all of that.
Right.
So we discover that it is us holding ourselves back from the growth that we are wanting to see.
Yep. excellent points. So now we've talked a little bit about your risk tolerance and your financial resources and what you need to look at from that perspective if you're looking to fund the business. Now, the next thing is I always tell people they should do, and I know you haven't even started the business yet. You may not have this may not be perfect, but I think you should always look and evaluate how much is it going to take for me to start up the business. And I know this is one of those things that Madeline and I go back and forth. She goes, it's not going to cost that. Or I'm going to say, well, it might. But what I'm looking to accomplish is a structure and a framework of understanding what I think it will be. So now that I can put my mind around funding, risk, right? But also when I'm making business decisions, because now I'm at this point, I'm saying I'm pretty close to moving forward, right? I'm getting past I got my emotional why. I've got my personal skills and experience, and I understand what I need to do or what I need to have help me do. I understand what my business is. Is it more of a hobby or is it a full-fledged business? I understand where my risk tolerance is. I understand what I'm thinking about for funding the business. What are my options? And now I'm looking at how do I understand what I need to have in the bank? What do I need to fund? Right, this business, this idea. And it's not that you're going to have it perfect. The idea is it helps you make good business decisions. So for example, is if you are knowing you're going to have to lease, whether it's office space, retail space, whatever, do you know what you think that is going to cost? Do you have an idea what you're willing and what you think is an amount that you can? Because if you've come up with an idea, you already have an idea on what you're going to charge. If you already know what you're going to charge, and you already know what you want to make, you already know how much you have to do of it. So now you have to figure out how much is it going to cost me a month to do it? How much is it going to cost me to build it out? And we are going to have a discussion about startup versus franchise costs, because I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding on some of that and what it really is like. But to me, understanding, okay, I'm going to have a lease space. Say you built in, I'm just using a number, $10,000, right? Well, that's a good sized number. Now, you start looking, but you don't know how much space you're going to need. But you're saying you can afford $10,000.
Right.
That's what you believe the business will be able to afford. That's fine. We will get granular on this later. Now you have an idea. Okay, when I start looking at space, if I'm finding ideal space and it's coming in less, I'm winning.
Yes.
If it's coming in more, I need to understand how that's going to impact the other numbers.
Yes.
Right? So also, when you go for your financing, guess what they're going to ask you? Yeah. What are your startup costs going to be?
Right.
What are you going to need to invest? Because here's the thing, guys, if you do an SBA loan, I know I'm bouncing back, you can't start the business already. You have to have all this put in place before you can actually start your business. Because once you start your business, then you can't get that type of financing. But I don't want to go into a whole lot of that right now. It's more just FYI on that part. But to me, understanding your costs helps you, like I said, make every business decision that's possible.
Sure.
Okay? So the last thing I wanted to talk about, now that we know all that information.
So let me ask you a question before we move on from that topic. Do you recommend that they have 6 months of a safety net?
Safety net. Like, okay, so for example, and I'm going to use this as an example, guys, like if you're starting a franchise, right? They'll say that you need at least 3 months of this, 3 months of this, 3 months of that. And I do believe that that is a fine number. I think when you're starting from scratch, though, and if you're creating your own brand, you need to be, in both scenarios, 6 is better. I think if you're starting from scratch, you absolutely need 6 because you don't have brand recognition yet, depending on what type of business you're in. So I do believe that you should have 6 months, not only for your personal reserves, but 6 months for employee payroll, 6 months for utilities, 6 months for rent. Now, I'm not going to get into rent because that depends a little bit on how you negotiate it.
Right.
So, but absolutely, and that should be as a part of what you're projecting as your startup costs, because and you need to be able to outline that, because Now, if what's the worst that happens in that scenario? You don't need it, right?
Right.
Well, actually, that's the best case scenario.
Yeah, that is the best.
The worst case scenario is you use it, right? Now,
well, at least you have it.
That's right.
So it again is foreshadowing the potential,
Yeah.
guarding yourself into putting yourself in a position that you don't have to lay off anybody.
Correct.
Right. Or that, expenses increase over time.
Yeah.
Unexpected things. And
Absolutely.
it happens a lot.
Yeah, I think that, when you're looking at, it's a great question, Madeline, and I apologize to guys for not actually having that thought in my head today, but I normally do that. And then
No, I know you do it. That's why you probably didn't think about it.
it's part of my everyday opportunity, right?
Yeah.
But I look at it from that standpoint because is exactly that. And even if you're in a franchise, not all franchises take off just like that. Doesn't mean they don't work. It just simply says that sometimes in different markets, it may take longer.
Yes.
Right? You may have to get better at your sales process. You may find that your marketing spend isn't driving the type of leads that you want, right? There's a lot of things that can impact that.
Yes.
So it's best to be prepared. And like I said, we're going to talk a little bit about ad spend on a future show because I think it's really important. A lot of mistakes people make in understanding it, but also understanding how things should happen, when they should happen. If it happens before that, it's great. If it's happening slightly after that, you should be taking other steps. There are things in the first 30 days that you certainly can identify, but you can't really tell me after 30 days the campaign is a success or a failure. You can just tell me that this is what I'm seeing, okay?
Right.
So lots into that. But yeah, startup costs should include, in my opinion, 6 months. Some people will tell you more depending on the type
Some
of
people
business.
will tell you a year.
Right. If you're building a product from scratch, you're probably going to need more. However, you're going to have other costs that you're not going to have in at that point.
Right.
If you're building out a manufacturing type place, then you're going to have to build in that equipment, lack of sales until you start producing, right? So there's a lot that goes into startup costs. You're absolutely right. And that's a great point, Madeline. Thank you.
You're welcome.
The last thing, which I think you're going to all kind of chuckle a little bit with me, is it kind of goes with the first one, which is your why and your emotional why. However, you're going to say, David, we don't even have the business open yet.
Well,
Why?
you did say that to me earlier. So I'm gonna call you out on that.
Right. Okay. Why are we talking about an exit strategy before we even launch?
Why?
Well, I'm going to tell you, Madeline.
Well, we haven't even had the company open yet.
That's right. So this is the why I always have what I want to do with the business. First, there's a number of things that you can have for an exit strategy, right? You may want to build a business that just simply replaces the income you had. You want it for X number of years, and after that, you're really not thinking about anything beyond. That's fine. It's absolutely fine. I would prefer to know what I want to do with that business. I would want to know, is this business for generational wealth? Am I looking to hand this business down to my children and their children, right? And there's reasons why you want to know that, because in the beginning, you need to be making sure you're developing people to take over the business.
Right.
Right? Probably have to have children if you're going to do it that way. But then maybe you want to sell it. Well, if you're going to sell your business, or maybe you're going to want to take your concept that's such a great idea and you now believe it can be franchisable.
Right.
So there's things you're going to have to do from the beginning of the business in order to be prepared to do that. And we talk about it a lot. And one of the things we did early on with both of our businesses from scratch, it's a little easier when you buy franchises because they already have this. But you have to document everything. You document the equipment you purchase. You document vendors. You document every aspect of it. You document your sales process. You document your lead process. How do you handle what's your onboarding experience? If you don't have an exit strategy in mind, you don't know how to build the business from the beginning. You can wing it. And then let me tell you what happens is you get confronted with the opportunity to sell and they say, yeah, that's great, but how do you do it?
Right. Right. It's
Or-
no different than having a pitch deck when you are trying to get money from somebody to fund your idea.
That's right.
Yeah.
And also, wouldn't you think if you're pitching to an investor, they'd like to know what your exit strategy is?
Yes, every time.
Every time. So to me, it is the second part of the why, right? It could be emotional. It could be 100% non-emotional. It could be just economic.
Right, right.
And in reality, it probably is both. So to me, the exit strategy, and you've heard me say this to people when we've talked, I'm like, well, what's your plan? How do you build a roadmap unless you know where you're going to go?
Yeah.
You don't take a trip without a destination. Well, you could, but then you're just going to places because you want to be
Well, it's
there.
like being on the ocean without a compass. That's pretty scary.
I'd be worried more about without a boat. But
Well, no, you'll be in the boat.
I don't. Anyway, so to me, exit strategy is one of those things that people don't think about, but they should. And it's just as important as your initial emotional why,
Yeah.
right? Because it really puts everything in place. And I know that, for example, when I do performance, I'm projecting not only the first couple of years, but then I project out, okay, if everything trajects the way I hope it does, where is my 4X number? Where is my 3X number?
Right,
You know,
right.
and if somebody comes up, and this is the truth, guys, when you have a business that's ready to be sold, you don't know it. Somebody wants to buy you,
Yeah.
right? And then you're caught because you don't have a number. And you're caught because you don't have certain things. So build it from scratch. And if you're a franchise and you're buying into a franchise, still document everything that you're doing. Because you may end up wanting to sell your franchise.
Right. And every franchise is uniquely different because it is based on where it's at and
Yes.
who's running it.
That is correct. That is correct. So I know it sounds like a weird one to finish with, but it kind of goes with the first and the last. And I like that because it's closure, right? So remember, guys, things that we think you should evaluate are what your why is, but more importantly, what the emotional why is. That will keep you driving. Understanding your personal skills and experience, that will help you understand how you get to be better working on your business versus in your business.
Right.
Understanding if what your business is it a full-fledged business? Is it more of a hobby business? Financing resources, there are lots of ways to fund a business. And you should look at all of those options before you make a final decision. But understanding risk tolerance and how to overcome it is critical. Then the idea of, what was the next one? I should know this.
What do you mean? Look at your notes.
I will. Oh, a guesstimate on your startup costs.
Yes.
And why is that important? Because if you're looking at investors, they're going to want to know what you're thinking you're going to need to spend. If
Yeah.
you're looking at lending options and financing options, they're going to want to know what you're going to spend, and they're going to try to hold you, and they can help you with that. And lastly is coming up with what your exit strategy is. And if you come up with your exit strategy, I'm telling you, it makes everything so much easier as you flow because you're working towards a goal. Right? Instead of, I'm working to opening up a business. Great. Are you doing every day? Are you doing something towards what your exit strategy is? That's the number one question that you need to be asking yourself as you start launching. So guys, we hope that you guys found this to be insightful, helpful, and that you enjoyed the content. We are excited about bringing the next episode to you. It's going to have to do with building a business from scratch versus looking at a franchise, understanding some of those differences in costs and things like that, and things that are pros and things that are cons. And then if you like this content, we ask that you like it. And if you're not a subscriber, subscribe to it. And if you know someone else that our content can help, please refer us. That is the most valuable thing that you can get in any business is a referral. And hopefully that they will like it and subscribe as well. And lastly, if you have a question that you would like us to answer for you directly, then all I ask you to do is email questions@trustedpreneurs.com, and we will answer it for you personally. But if it's a really, really good question, we may have it on one of our next shows. So guys, until next time, thank you for listening and good luck.